Briarwood. The name itself sounded like a whisper. A village nestled in a forgotten valley, shrouded in mist and legend. Ancient oaks, gnarled and twisted, lined the road like skeletal guardians. Their branches, bare even in what passed for daylight, clawed at the sky. At the valley's heart stood Briarwood Manor, a mansion of crumbling stone and shattered windows, its silhouette a jagged wound against the leaden sky. The villagers spoke of Briarwood Manor in hushed tones, their words were laced with fear and superstition. They told tales of a family cursed, the Halloways, their laughter once echoing through the manor's halls, now silenced, replaced by the whispers of the wind and the creak of decaying wood. Some claimed to see lights flickering in the dead of night, others heard the mournful strains of a piano, long since silenced by dust and time. The manor stood as a monument to tragedy, a stark silhouette against the unforgiving landscape. Its very stones seemed to weep with sorrow. The air grew heavy as one approached its rusted gates. A chill settled in the bones, a harbinger of the darkness that lingered within. Briarwood Manor was a place of secrets, buried deep beneath layers of dust and decay. Secrets that whispered on the wind, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to listen. The outsider arrived with the setting sun. His name was Victor, a scholar drawn to the mysteries that clung to Briarwood like cobwebs. He had journeyed for weeks, his head filled with tales of the cursed Halloway family. He sought the truth hidden behind the whispers. The villagers warned him, their eyes filled with a lifetime of fear, pleaded with him to turn back. They spoke of a darkness that consumed all who dared to disturb the manor's slumber. But Victor dismissed their warnings as mere superstition. He was a man of logic, of reason. He would not be swayed by ghost stories. "There is no such thing as curses," he declared, his voice echoing in the hushed silence of the village inn. "Only tragedy and the echoes it leaves behind." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the truth. Briarwood Manor was more than just an empty shell. It was a living, breathing entity, and it did not welcome visitors. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay as Victor stepped across the threshold. Dust motes danced in the faint slivers of light that pierced the gloom. He ran a hand along the dusty surface of a cobweb-draped table. The house sighed around him, a low groan of timber and stone. Each room he explored whispered tales of a life long gone. A nursery, its rocking horse frozen mid-gallop. A grand dining hall, its table set for a feast that never came. Shadows stretched and danced in the fading light, playing tricks on the eyes. The silence was broken only by the sound of Victor's own footsteps. Each step echoed through the empty halls, amplifying the sense of solitude that permeated the mansion. It was as if the house itself was watching him, its unseen eyes following his every move. He reached the grand staircase. Its once gleaming banister was now covered in a thick layer of dust. The portraits lining the walls stared down at him, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. He continued upward, drawn deeper into the heart of the mansion. The air grew noticeably colder, sending a shiver down his spine. He found the diary tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic, a small leather-bound volume, its pages brittle with age. The name Eliza Halloway was inscribed on the cover in elegant script. He opened the diary and began to read. Eliza's words painted a vivid picture of life at Briarwood Manor, a time of joy and laughter before the shadows fell. She wrote of her family, of her beloved brother William and her parents. Her words were filled with a youthful exuberance that belied the tragedy that was to come. As the days in the diary turned into weeks, a change crept into Eliza's writing. A darkness began to seep into her words, a growing sense of dread. She wrote of strange occurrences, of whispers in the night, of shadows that seemed to move on their own. The final entries were filled with a palpable fear. Eliza wrote of a curse, a malevolent force that had descended upon Briarwood Manor, a curse that had claimed her brother William and threatened to consume her family whole. Victor closed the diary, his heart heavy with a nameless dread. Eliza's words had painted a chilling picture of the darkness that had befallen Briarwood Manor, a darkness that he now realized was very real. The portrait hung at the end of a long, darkened hallway. Bathed in the ghostly glow of moonlight streaming through a broken window, it depicted a young woman of ethereal beauty. Her eyes, a piercing blue, seemed to follow Victor as he approached. Eliza Halloway. Her beauty was undeniable, even in the faded paint, but there was a sadness in her eyes, a hint of the tragedy that had befallen her. He stood before the portrait, mesmerized by the woman's gaze. It was as if she were trying to communicate with him, to tell him her story. He felt a cold spot form beside him, though there was no draft. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He could sense a presence in the room with him, a presence that was not entirely of this world. A chill wind swept through the hallway, causing the flames in the nearby candelabra to flicker and dance. The portrait swayed slightly on its hook as if stirred by an unseen hand, and then he heard it. A soft, mournful sigh. It seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Victor turned slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The hallway was empty, and yet, he could feel the presence growing stronger. He was not alone. The air grew colder still, biting at his skin. The scent of damp earth and decaying flowers filled his nostrils. He could hear the rustle of silk, the faint whisper of a woman's voice. "Help me," the voice whispered. A plea laden with centuries of sorrow. Victor's blood ran cold. He knew then that the legends were true. Briarwood Manor was indeed haunted, and he was trapped within its grasp. He wanted to run, to escape the suffocating darkness that had descended upon him. But his feet felt rooted to the spot. He was paralyzed by a fear unlike anything he had ever known. He was not a religious man, but a prayer formed on his lips. A desperate plea for deliverance from the unseen force that held him captive. Then, as quickly as it had descended, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The temperature returned to normal, the scent of decay faded, and the whispering voice was gone. Victor stood there for a long moment, his heart still racing in his chest. He was alone. Or was he? He had been a fool to dismiss the warnings of the villagers. Briarwood Manor was a place of immense sorrow, its very stones saturated with the weight of tragedy. He had stumbled into something ancient and powerful, something that he did not fully understand. He had to leave, to escape the suffocating darkness of the manor before it consumed him entirely. As he turned to go, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A small silver locket lay on the floor at his feet. He bent down and picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly. The locket was cold to the touch, its surface tarnished with age. He pried it open and gasped. Inside was a miniature portrait of Eliza Halloway. The same piercing blue eyes stared back at him, filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. He had to help her. He didn't know how, but he had to try. Victor fled Briarwood Manor as the first rays of dawn pierced the darkness. He left behind the decaying mansion and the secrets it held. But the experience left an indelible mark on his soul. He returned to his studies, but his thoughts often drifted back to Briarwood, to Eliza Halloway and the curse that bound her to the decaying mansion. He researched ancient rituals, desperate to find a way to break the curse and free her spirit. He knew that he could not rest until he had fulfilled his promise to Eliza. Years later he returned to Briarwood, armed with knowledge and a newfound determination. He sought out the source of the curse, the root of the evil that haunted Briarwood Manor. He spent weeks poring over ancient texts, deciphering cryptic passages and piecing together the tragic history of the Halloway family. He discovered that Eliza's brother, William, had not been claimed by illness as she had believed, but by a jealous rival who had cursed the family in a fit of rage. He performed the ancient ritual, his voice echoing through the silent halls of Briarwood Manor. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist around him. He could feel Eliza's presence beside him, guiding his actions. As the final words left his lips, a blinding light filled the mansion. The air grew still, and the oppressive atmosphere that had clung to Briarwood for centuries lifted. When Victor opened his eyes, he was alone. The locket that had contained Eliza's portrait lay open on the floor, its contents gone. He knew then that he had succeeded. The curse was broken, and Eliza was finally free. He left Briarwood Manor that day, his heart filled with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. He knew that he would never forget the haunting beauty of Eliza Halloway, or the darkness that had once consumed Briarwood. But the village was no longer shrouded in fear. The whispers had ceased, replaced by the sounds of children's laughter and the chirping of birds. Briarwood Manor still stood on the hill, a silent sentinel overlooking the valley, but it was no longer a place of darkness. It was a place of peace. The curse was broken, and the village of Briarwood was finally free.